Not everything in life that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Good evening, I'm J.R. Jamison. I am the co-founder of the Facing Project, which is a 501c3 nonprofit headquartered in Muncie, Indiana, but working nationally in communities across the country to help them tell their stories. When my co-founder, Kelsey Timmerman, and I co-founded the Facing Project 5 years ago in Muncie, we did so because we both believed in the first-person stories as a tool to help create community change. As a person who believes so much in community and volunteerism, I'm often told you should use your skill sets to make effective change. You shouldn't try to make change in ways that you're not good, because if we all come together with our skill sets to make true community change, that's when the magic happens. Well, both of us are writers. So what are our skill sets? We were storytellers. So we approached a nonprofit in Muncie called Teamwork for Quality Living and their Circles program. And we said we want to help you better tell your story about how you face poverty in the Muncie community each day. Their executive director loved the idea. We partnered 21 writers with 21 storytellers who wanted to share their story. The pairs got to know each other, got to learn their triumphs, their fears, all of their rejoices. And the writers wrote a first-person narrative with the storytellers. Those were all combined in a book and brought to life on stage at the Muncie Civic Theater. About 200 folks turned out for that event. The mayor came. He was really excited about what he saw and what he experienced. I also served as a writer on that project. And I sat side by side with my storyteller at the event. And I thought to myself, I can't believe a story I wrote is being performed on stage at Muncie Civic Theater. And then I looked to my side to Pat, who was my storyteller, and I saw the look on her face. She was watching her life being performed on stage by an actress. And that completely blew my mind. Pat and I continued our relationship after facing poverty in Delaware County. We continued volunteering together in the Circles program. But Kelsey and I saw something bigger than us, bigger than what happened in Muncie. So we started putting together a toolkit and some materials, and we reached out to a few folks we knew, and we said, hey, we think we have something here that can help you help others tell their stories. And that's really how the Facing Project began. It started really small here in Indiana, spread to about 5 communities, spread to a few communities right outside of Indiana, and today we're in 75 communities across the country, using the exact same model that I just described. Facing poverty, facing homelessness, facing addiction, facing hope, which are stories of folks who have come out of incarceration. These are all first-person stories that are being told in communities learning from their own stories, thinking about how their stories can create action. Going back to the James Baldwin quote I shared at the very beginning, that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. That is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to begin the conversations with stories to increase empathy. When we look at the empathy levels nationwide, we're at the lowest we've ever been since 1980. Empathy levels among college students have actually dropped 30% in the last 5 years. That's a real problem. We're not talking to each other. We're not having conversations across difference. We're not understanding the other on either side. So what we hope through the Facing Project is that through stories, we can begin conversations about coming together as a community defined broadly. Today, the Facing Project, as I mentioned, in 75 communities, we worked with 7,500 volunteers. That's been really exciting. That includes storytellers who are brave enough to come forward and share their stories. That includes the writers who have sat down with those storytellers. That includes project organizers. One of those project organizers is here tonight. He has been a strong partner with the Facing Project the last 3 years, And he helped put together, well, he directed actually, I should say, not only helped, he directed this iteration of the Facing Project. So it is my honor to bring to the stage my strong partner in this work, Dr. Adam Cuban from Ball State University.
Thanks, JR. So, Kelsey Timmerman, who couldn't be here tonight, but as JR mentioned, is the co-founder of the Facing Project. He approached me in April 2014 asking me to write then for Facing Disabilities. He knew I was a writer, and actually, it wasn't so much that he asked me as I was voluntold that I would write for that particular iteration. But Kelsey and I had known each other since 2012. We're both big brothers, a part of the Big Brothers, Big Sisters program, and I wanted to help a friend, so I agreed. But all the while, I was trying to find a way to bring this model that JR just described into a classroom setting. This model felt like it could become a good fit for a group of college students and for what I teach, the community engagement, the interviewing, the writing, the media production, the public event where we find ourselves tonight. Facing Addiction actually came about, as it turns out, from a casual suggestion during the project that I directed last year, which was Facing Cancer in East Central Indiana. During one of my interviews with one of my storytellers, he said that he thought this topic deserved our attention. And I always say that when I'm directing a project like this that I'm not going to write. That is my background too. I also have a broadcast background, but I always say I'm not going to write. I'm going to do what I need to do to move the project forward, and then I end up writing. So that happened with Facing Cancer too, and at one point with that storyteller, he told me that he had been given pain medication to ease the discomfort that came with his chemotherapy treatments. And eventually that cancer diagnosis went into remission, but his addiction to opiates persisted and escalated into heroin usage. And I remember during that interview with him, it was while he was in fact recalling and describing his suicide attempt, he mentioned that this next project ought to be about facing addiction. So that stuck in the back of my head, and the first conversation with Aspire Indiana occurred last April with Kevin Sheward, whom you'll meet shortly. And Aspire was the first community partner who joined this effort, followed by Muncie Action Plan and then Meridian Health Services in Delaware County. And throughout the evening, you'll likely meet some of my students. And these are freshmen, sophomores, and juniors at Ball State University who have dedicated themselves to this project since last August. And in these introductory remarks, I was asked to describe a bit about our process. And as I was preparing my remarks, I wasn't really sure how to go about doing that because it's very cyclical, very iterative. And so I decided to approach it this way. For our process, the last 7 months, my students have created, discussed, debated, then discussed again, then developed, planned, and coordinated. They have then arranged, interviewed, written, edited, then written again, then edited again, then written again, then edited again. They've researched, traveled, recorded, edited, then recorded again, then edited again. They've compromised, organized, designed, discussed some more, debated some more, and then promoted. They have listened, and they have learned, and in the end, they've demonstrated a consistent commitment to bring Facing Addiction to Madison County this evening. In the end, we want to inform, and we want this to serve as the first step toward ending the stigma that surrounds addiction. And with that, please allow me to introduce Kevin Sheward from Aspire, Indiana.
Thank you, JR and Adam, for your introductions and your opening remarks. I want to build off of their statements and say that tonight is not the culmination of the Facing Addiction project. Tonight is adding fuel to the flame of conversation that has at times burned brightly in our community and at times flickered. Awareness, understanding, compassion, and action are all part of our vision for what Facing Addiction will look like in East Central Indiana. Thank you to all of you for your attendance this evening, as the next step starts with you. Aspire Indiana has been privileged to work alongside the Facing Project this year. I can't say enough good things about these students from Ball State. They've worked very hard. It's been very intentional about bringing their best foot forward and telling the stories that you're about to hear in the best light possible. As an integrated healthcare provider offering behavioral health and primary care services, Aspire knows well the issue of addiction in our community. We see it from individuals who are addicted. We see it from individuals through our housing program who end up losing housing because they've lost their employment. This issue doesn't just affect primary care and the health of the individual, it affects our entire community. These individuals could be family members, it could be your neighbors, it could be friends of your kids. This issue is far-reaching, oftentimes whether we see it or not. As you listen to these stories in their unaltered, purest form, I encourage you to pay special attention to the journey to and from addiction, as well as the work that is being done to offer hope and recovery, as well as the work that is yet to be done. You may find these stories in a language that is used to be unsettling, but I hope that you allow them the space and your openness to them so that we can hear them and so that we together can face addiction. Thank you.
It was a Saturday night. My husband and I sat down and watched the 10 o'clock news for some reason, I don't know. And it was like, breaking news. And they showed my brother Joey's picture, and I almost fainted. He had been on a binge for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. In the middle of that night, he held up a pharmacy and robbed it. He has no recollection to this day that he even did it. He was so high on heroin that he had no idea. My brother was married 8 years ago, and he had a little boy, and he had built this house, and he had a wonderful job. He was just on top of the world. And every day the pressures got to him. He never came out and said it, but I could tell on his face that he was just going through the motions of life. He started to party with his friends a lot on weekends. He started doing drugs and just spiraled out of control. That night, the police were on the hunt for him. We were on the phone with him all night long, and I just wanted to keep hearing his voice, keeping him on the phone. We talked about anything I could think of, life in general, my kids, him getting help. They ended up catching him, but he didn't have any weapons on him, and thankfully, they didn't have to shoot. He served 7 years in prison for that. He graduated from a rehabilitation program and with 2 certificates to be a personal trainer. He was doing great. He got his GED when he got out, and he was really doing well for over a year. And then it started all over again. I don't know what he tries to run from. He said he's been running from demons, but I don't know where they're from. It's an absolutely helpless feeling knowing that someone you love goes through struggles like this from day to day, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. I'm just hoping one day that he will find something that will give him the passion to turn this addiction around, because I know it's something that because I don't know what it's gonna take. I hope he doesn't become a statistic, but that's on him. That's his decision if he wants to stop. In this game he's playing, it's either you live or you die, one or the other. I hope he gets help before it becomes too late. We tried finding him help here in Indiana before moving him back to Boston, but there's no resources here. If we had more resources to help people, it would save a lot of lives. We need more facilities in Indiana to help the heroin epidemic. There are a few places, but the waiting list is just too long. There are no rehab centers for people to go to, and that's why they end up on the street again. The families here are tired and have no means to care for their family. It's extremely frustrating to me. Addicts and alcoholics, they don't just wake up one day and decide this is what they want to do. Nobody's going to say, oh, doing drugs or drinking alcohol was the best thing I ever did. You're not weak. You're not a lowlife or a loser or an idiot because you do drugs. That's not the case. It's a sickness, and it's an illness, and it's a disease that they can't help. There can also be an underlying reasons for addiction. I believe Joey has depression, anxiety, and ADHD that was never treated. And he could also be bipolar, because when he's up, he's up. And when he's down, he's very down. But I think until those issues are dealt with, alcoholism and that drug addiction are never going to stop. I used to think that if they would just stop drinking or doing drugs, then But you can't just stop. They can't do that. I don't want somebody looking at my brother like he's nobody. He has loved ones. He has a family that cares about him. And that goes for all addicts and drug users. They're people with families, children, careers, and very bright futures. But they made bad choices, and unfortunately, not everybody who tries drugs can kick that habit.
As the sheriff of Madison County, I've learned that we do not approach this addiction epidemic in the correct manner. We were not unreasonable with how we approached addicts in the past, just ignorant. When I was a street cop, I thought these people did it to themselves, and they were just getting high for the fun of it, wasting my time and their lives. My mind never thought about why they started using in the first place. I never once thought about if addicts had a mental illness holding them back, or if a rough childhood led them to my handcuffs. I was ignorant. People care about these individuals. People want to help them get better. The problem is those people willing to help these addicts don't know how to help them, and most communities don't have the resources to help them. I began to ask myself, why do people do this to themselves? Why do people repeatedly do this to themselves? I mean, what is the point of their substance abuse? It took me a while to realize that many people addicted to drugs and alcohol are not addicted to the feeling. They are addicted to the void that is filled with being under the influence of whichever drug they choose. That drug fills such a deep void with these addicts go to desperate measures to fill this indescribable pain. Addicts hit a point with their addiction where they are not using to just get high. At this point, addicts use substances to avoid a desperate low. A desperate low that takes control over how an addict lives every second of their life. They cannot even imagine sleep or eating if they have not had their shot of heroin, sip of alcohol, or smoke of crack. I see these addicts in our holding cells every day. Wearing that orange jumpsuit, they lie on the cold concrete floor with a large pail of water next to them helping their detox. I may have changed my policing ideologies from the 1980s, but our policing framework still tends to encompass three options with dealing with addicts. 1, continue enforcement in jail, similar to my 1980 rewind. 2, place some but not all of these addicts into rehab program, but there are not enough resources, are there? Addicts continue to walk the streets, sometimes committing crime to get high, which allows them to fill their void but doesn't correct the problem. Jailing addicts does not work. There is no hope in jail. The faces in jail have no hope. The outlook of jail has no hope. But we still try and help. The state supplies funding to Madison County for the most desperate of addicts and mentally ill inmates within our jail, but we need more. We provide treatment and counselors for these addicts to help them while locked up. This treatment plan has 2 goals, but it needs a third. These goals are to 1, help these addicts and mentally ill cope because there is no hope in jail, and 2, develop an exit plan for their addiction for after jail because there may be nowhere else to go. All the treatment is within their time in jail. After leaving jail, these addicts typically have no place to go. I've talked to countless addicts and they all tell me the same thing. I'm scared of what's outside these doors and I have nowhere to go besides drugs. That is the third step, providing a place for these individuals to go after their third time in jail and our treatment program. Without it, they will most likely go back to their addiction. We must give addicts hope for a new life, possibilities of life after their addiction, so they have a purpose and a safe place to live. Without hope, addicts will go back to using because they have no vision of what life could be without their addiction. There's only one solution. In order to give addicts hope, the general public must realize that addiction is a community issue. And if we want to help fix it, we need community-driven solutions. I understand why the general public does not want to do that. They do not want to see their tax dollars go to a drug addict. The general public does not see how drug addiction in their community affects them individually. What the general public needs to realize is that it's affecting them. They just don't get it. For example, look at the closed gas stations, grocery stores, and dwindling homes. Drug addiction is driving away our community.
The alarm clock blared from the side of my bed. I rubbed my eyes, trying to wipe away the blurry 5:30 that stood on the face of the clock. Gently, trying not to wake the boys, I tapped snooze. Nope, not today. Today's not going to happen. We usually don't sleep like this, all bundled tight under warm blankets, but Bryson had been having night terrors, so he and Brennan slept with me. It was my favorite part of the day. There in bed with the two people I loved most right next to me, nothing else mattered. I dug deeper and let the ocean of blankets cover us all as I held my two boys tighter. 30 minutes would have to be enough. The clock stared at me, telling me it was 6. I would have known that this day could turn out badly, just like every other day. I choose not to stay with my routine. I'm full of good decisions now more than ever before in my life, but I swear it seems like every one good decision I make 2 bad choices. I texted my boss and said I wasn't coming in. I felt bad, but not bad enough to see if he'd read it. This was the bad decision I had made that morning. But 2 years ago, my bad decisions were different. Much different. There is a void in me. It consumes me. It claims everything I have. Everyone must fill this void with whatever they can. Love, with family, with God. And for 6 years of my life, I filled that void with heroin and painkillers. At 6:15, I told the kids that we were playing hooky that day. They jumped up and down, yelled in joy. They didn't want to go to school as much as I didn't want to go to work. Then, I remembered the old decisions I would make. I remembered the void I fed with addiction a few years ago. I still remember the day, years ago, when I was in a relationship with the boys' dad, when we were driving home from their grandparents' house. The kids were in the backseat of the car, and we pulled over to the side of the driveway. He shifted into park, and we had some money, and we had bought heroin. Separating the back seat from the front seats with a thin sheet, we shot up in the car next to the boys. The sheet I thought would keep me from swallowing them into the void. The uphill, everyday battle called addiction is still with me. It grabs me and pulls me down. It pulls me away from what I love. I feel it most when I look at my kids. How could I have done the things that I did? I think about my life and where I come from, where I'm going, what made me who I am. For a while, my past, present, and future was addiction. My past reminds me that I have a history greater than my void. I want to know how they were. I want to find simplicity and honest goodness in my life. I don't want to entertain the void. For years, my life didn't have the type of balance my great-grandparents had. I came from a broken home, a father in jail, and a mother who was lost in herself. For years, I filled my life, my void, with instant gratification that took the pain and poisoned me and ate away at my future. Once I tried to quit, guilt and shame trapped into the void. I looked at my children and I feel the responsibility for them and for myself weighing on my heart. I love these boys. They are my world. They are my life. I failed before, but I will not fail again. They fill my void today. I have an overabundance of perseverance and self-control. He who lives in me is greater than he who lives in the world. Blessed is she who believes in the fulfillment of the promises the Lord has spoken to her heart. and I am beautifully and fearfully made. My name is Ashley Dotterer. I am 26 and I am the mother of 2 wonderful children. My journey has been long, but it is not over. Today, I choose to fill the void with my own life, with love, and with God.
I had my hand on the doorknob about to go in, but suddenly I was overcome with shame. Here I was, once again, about to take the new beginner's token and start working the program anew at 53 years old. The shame was overwhelming, crippling. I couldn't breathe. It told me to turn back. It made me believe that I could never get a handle on my life and my recovery. So I started back down the sidewalk. Then suddenly the light bulb above my head went on and I had this moment of clarity. Where do you think you're going? You have nowhere to go to and no one to turn. If you leave here, you are going to die. I told myself this, and I knew it was true. I would have died. I had pushed the envelope too far, farther than anyone I had known. Almost everyone I had originally come into the recovery with had died. And if I hadn't turned around and walked right back into the recovery room, death would have been the next step for me. So at 53 years old, I walked back into the recovery room. I grabbed my beginner's token and I faced the shame that had weighed me down for so long. I remember sharing that night and telling everyone, I'm going to do exactly what you suggest. Read the literature, get a sponsor, find higher power, come to meetings every day. And when I relapsed, it's not going to be my fault this time. That was the attitude I went into with. Shame was a difficult sentiment to subdue. It's different than guilt in the way that it makes you believe that you are the bad thing. Guilt is recognizing that the things you have done to be bad, but shame convinces you that you are the bad person because of the things you have done, the things that disease has made you do. Addiction is a disease, and the symptoms of the disease rear its ugly head. You feel shame, you feel guilt, and you do almost anything to stop feeling these emotions, including putting the drug back into your system. There's no denying that the lying, cheating, and stealing that accompany addiction are symptoms of the disease. They are ugly and vile symptoms, but they do not define us as addicts. They do not define me. They are part of the disease. Before, I was so focused on becoming successful in my outward life, whether that meant making tons of money, driving new cars, or having a big house, that I never bothered to look inward at myself. I never came to terms with what was really spurring this self-destruction. Addiction is a coping mechanism to bury the emotions that we don't want to feel. For years, this was my way of distancing myself from these emotions. So in losing that mechanism, I had to learn how to deal with the shame, guilt, and yes, self-hatred that I had kept buried for so long. This empathy that I recognized within myself drove me to work harder, and as a result, I continued to make progress and recover. I was finally focused on recovery. The new outlook was due to the 12th step in the program, to have a spiritual awakening. My newly found empathy for others was a spiritual awakening after getting this far in the program. So as of November 2016, I have been clean for 11 years, and it took me 32 years to get to that. It's amazing how much better life becomes. I feel very fortunate to have gotten to this point in my recovery, especially because of my age. It's not often addicts get to grow old. This disease has killed many, and it will kill more until we, as a society, do something about it.
Immediately next to me is Susan Mayer. She started doing social work in 1995 and earned a master's degree in social work from Anderson University and IUPUI. She's trained in substance abuse treatment, problem gambling treatment, crisis intervention, stress management, and suicide prevention. Susie has spent 9 years as the Director for Comprehensive Outpatient Services, and she's received 2 awards to date, the Shining Star Award and the Champions for Children Award. And then next to her is Sheriff Scott Mellinger, Madison County Sheriff. He served as Executive Director of the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy and as Sheriff from 1991 to 1998, prior till now. Next to him is Sid Emke. and she is a certified family nurse practitioner who completed training at IU School of Nursing and Indiana Wesleyan. She also has an MBA from Butler University. And then farthest from me is Clayton Whitson, our Madison County Council member, who graduated from Indiana State University in 2007 with a Bachelor of Science degree in criminology. He's a firefighter and EMT for Elwood Fire Department and a member of the executive board of the Elwood Firefighters Union, who has worked for the Indiana State Police and Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. So welcome, and thank you very much for your time and expertise this evening. So, as I mentioned, we have 3 questions. The first that my students and I crafted for our panelists: how can we help somebody who we think may have an addiction? Specifically, what might be a person's first step?
Thanks. I think the first step for people to take is to come to the nearest available treatment facility. What I know over the time that I have been working with people who have addictions is that treatment works. But the first step is getting someone in the door and helping them get started. That's not an easy process. So for folks to have someone that they can take with them and bring to a facility like Aspire or the Anderson Center here in Madison County, those are places where we want people to come so that we can help them get started. The steps after that are really things that we can help people along in a step-by-step way, because everybody's an individual. There's no 1, 2, 3 step to treatment of addiction, because we want to make sure that we're helping that person with whatever co-occurring things that are going on in their life at the same time. So we want family involved. We want people that are very in tune with what someone who is facing addiction needs at the time. So trying to get people into the door to find treatment is really the first step that I always recommend.
And if any of the rest of you would care to answer that, you're welcome to. It doesn't have to be just one person.
First of all, I wouldn't ordinarily do this, but since Ball State is facilitating 1979 bachelor's degree go-karts, I think the first step, and we run into this quite often because people ask us quite often, I think is intervention and or confrontation. And I don't mean confrontation as in bullying someone. You have to confront individuals with what you think may or may not be happening. There's many ways to do that. It can be done in a passive way or in a very active way, but letting someone know that you know what's going on is important, but you also have to be there to support them. Support is extremely important so that the stigma is minimized, and support is necessary from the very beginning and honestly never ends, whether it's support when they get in trouble, support to make them realize that there are alternatives, support through the whole process and afterwards, because it's a lifelong issue. I'm totally convinced of that. It takes a lot of courage to confront someone. And I'll be honest with you, probably most of us don't have the courage. We have to build that up. But if we feel strongly enough, if we love someone enough, if we think they're important, and we are all important, hopefully one or many of us will take that step.
Thank you. So I was just thinking here as I was listening that everybody has an opinion about a first step. So from the primary care arena, my opinion is that we need to ask the question when we're seeing a child or when we're seeing a teenager in the medical office. I think for many years, we didn't want to ask about depression. We didn't want to ask about drug use. You know, I hear a lot of stories, and we give a lot of Vivitrol shots, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in the future here, but we give a lot of injections to people who have histories of drug abuse, and it's amazing the ages that the drug abuse starts. Somebody told me the other day they were 13 when they first put a needle in their arm. And there's reasons, as you heard from the students, there's psychological reasons why people do that. And from a primary care perspective, we need to ask the questions.
As Sid said, there are many different options. Everyone has probably their own idea of what a first step would be. Seeing someone that we would identify as potentially having an addiction problem, the first step that I would choose was to educate yourself on addiction, what that means, what they're going through. The more information that you can obtain on this, maybe the more strength that you can have to finally have that conversation with that individual, and then provide information to them. Let them know that there are resources and trained professionals, that that's their full-time job, that is their passion. They want to help people just like you.
Thank you. So our second question that we devised, how has the addiction epidemic impacted economics, specifically in Madison County?
So that's a difficult question to answer with a dollar amount because there are so many costs associated with addiction and abuse. The first, we'll just talk about the dollars at first. Madison County spends roughly $500,000 annually on our problem-solving court, our drug court. And this doesn't take into account all of the other courts that we have, and it doesn't take into account any grant funding that they receive, as well as the other drug offenders that don't qualify for drug courts. And then Sheriff Mellinger can speak to the current overcrowding problem that we have in the Madison County Jail. And certainly not all of these individuals are there for drug-related reasons, but I think undoubtedly that's a contributing factor to why our jail population is swelling. Secondly, I think those numbers would pale in comparison to the costs on the individuals themselves that have gone through the adjudication process. Labeling with the stigma of an ex-con or a drug abuser, that makes it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for them to find long-term sustainable employment with a decent wage. That alone has denied many members of our community an opportunity at a long-standing career. And then that factor gets multiplied when you consider dependents, children, that are immediately impacted on the inability for that person to find a decent wage. The kind of an ancillary to that would be the swelling in other social programs as a result of their inability to find a decent wage, in that the WIC programs, Medicaid programs, SNAP, all of these are increased because of their inability, because of the label, to find employment. And then lastly, before I talk your leg off here, would be the economic development standpoint from our communities. Three tangible assets that companies that are looking to relocate look at are crime statistics, available workforce, and the overall health ratings of our communities. And by available workforce, what I'm talking, they're looking, A, to see if there are enough people there to do the jobs, but is that market saturated with individuals that have the label of ex-con or drug abuse? These factors could be the deciding between a new company wanting to come to, say, Anderson versus Jeffersonville, Elkhart, Kokomo, and in the recently released health statistics, Madison County ranks 79th out of 92 counties in Indiana in overall health. Delaware County is 87th. So as a community, East Central Indiana must improve these numbers, and finally addressing the drug epidemic that's been going on here would go a long way to improve that.
So I'll just speak briefly from a medical standpoint. When somebody comes in for treatment of addiction, this does not count any of the costs associated with therapy. One Vivitrol injection, which is an every 4-week injection, which is a injectable naltrexone, is $1,500. The cost of the visit, the cost of the blood work that goes along with that, the urine pregnancy test that you have to do. By the time somebody comes back in for their 3rd visit, we're up to about $5,200 just in treatment for that addiction. And these shots can go on for 9 months, 12 months. So there's certainly an economic impact for the health sector as well.
Well, I do think that the drug epidemic has had substantial effect on the economy. I would turn it around, and I would also tell you that the economy has had a substantial effect on drug use, illegal drug use. There's no question in my mind. Madison County is a little bit unique. There might be 10 counties in Indiana that match Madison County's reliance on manufacturing for decades. And when those companies left, the economic void here is nearly irreparable. This city boasted 3 vibrant, large high schools for decades. General Motors left, and now we've got one high school that's doing everything they can to be a vibrant high school, and I applaud them. But in the late 70s, early 80s, General Motors employed 15, and I'm not blaming General Motors, but manufacturing employed 15,000 people in the city of Anderson in Madison County. Today, 0. That's where I saw things start to spiral out of control. And maybe that's just a law enforcement viewpoint, but I think that's important to think about.
I probably don't have much more to add than what the panelists have said, with the exception of the fact that the economy here and people trying to get jobs today, everybody has to pass a urine drug screen to get a job. And unfortunately, people can't find individuals to employ because they can't pass the urine drug screen. So if you can't get a job, it's going to be pretty hard to find hope and to find success and to find what your future might be defined as. So, we are looking at issues of suicide rates that have, frankly, gone up to percentages that I never dreamed of seeing. In 2010, and that's a while back, 28 people died by suicide. That's a whole classroom of kids. The drug abuse situation impacts suicide, and it impacts mental health issues, and it impacts just about every corner of an individual's life. And it's not just the person who's addicted, it's their family, because you heard it in all the stories, in all the video. It's about the family that's affected. And families, much as they love folks, dads can't follow their kids to go to school. They can't follow, what's going on in their communities. It's hard and it's time consuming, but that's what we're faced with today. We're faced with, what are we going to do as a community to help the people that are addicted? Because if your neural pathways are hijacked by opiates, you're going to have a hard time coming back from it. So, there are barriers that continue to really affect us and the economic situation that we have in Madison County, and I'm just glad we're talking about it tonight.
Yeah, if you want to hang on to that microphone, I'm going to prompt our panelists with that 3rd question in a moment, but as I promised you, I'm hoping they've opened the door, and I would invite you to walk through it. If you have a question, one of my students will be down at the microphone. It would be your right if you would join him down there, we'll ask this third question, and then the rest of the time is yours. So again, I hope you'll engage with our panelists tonight. So that third question involves history and legalese. Specifically, how have legal strategies evolved to address addiction?
Boy, that's a tough one. We've had a lot of changes here in Madison County, and our drug court, our Madison County problem-solving courts are absolutely packed, and the people that are there helping and assisting the folks that need help are amazing people, and they work hard every day, but they can't meet the need. They can't meet the need. The jails are unbelievably overcrowded, and we have no place to put people who really need recovery, and they need hope, because just like Sheriff said, they're not going to find hope in the jail. So the legal problems are huge. They're costly to the community, they're costly to the individuals, they're very costly to the families. Because it affects their future. It's not just that one day, it's their future too. So I'll let somebody who really knows about this tell you.
I have an opinion. I'm not sure how much I know about it, but I'm old. So I remember in the 1980s when the war on drugs was the cliche of the day. And as cops, it was a feather in our cap. The more people we could arrest for being high on drugs, being under the influence, being in possession of drugs. I mean, we cared about those arrests just as much as we did a big-time dealer, and that didn't work out very well. It packed our jails, it packed our prisons. It labeled people so they had a hard time getting a job. So legislatures in the mid-90s then changed gears pretty drastically and realized that arresting someone as a big-time drug dealer because they were selling 2 joints within 500 feet of a school, you weren't really busting a big-time dealer. Are you telling me I'm wrong? Oh, okay. But what you were doing was you were putting a petty dealer in prison who came out worse, more times than not. Not always, but more times than not. So, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think strict enforcement is an answer, but throwing everyone in jail is not, or prison. It's very ironic though, because I've seen a couple news articles recently where some very prominent judges in the state have put people in jail who are heroin addicts or meth addicts to save their lives. They've actually stated that. If I let this person out on their own recognizance or with a low bond, they will be dead in a week. So they're staying in jail. Well, that would be okay if the jails were equipped, but we're not. Our jail has 207 beds. We average 250 people a day. 3 weeks ago, we had 300 people in jail. With 207 beds, do the math. Everybody else sleeps on the floor. With 85% of people in county jails, that's a national survey, with 85% of people in county jails being there because of illegal drugs, either possession, use, or dealing. You have a situation there where people who need rehabilitation resources are not getting them. We're warehousing them. And I'm embarrassed every day when I walk through our jail and realize how many people are there that should be somewhere else. And there are people walking the street that should be in jail. That's what I lose sleep about. So what we're doing is not working. I meant what I said. It was read earlier very eloquently in the article. Until the entire community is made aware and wants to be made aware and digs their heels in and says we're going to do whatever we can to fix this, I'm afraid we're spinning our wheels, but obviously, hopefully, nights like this will get the word out.
So I'm kind of with him because I wanted to just mention briefly about the diversion program that is occurring for Madison County. And when I say diversion, this is the program that is taking the people who are using the drugs, they're bringing them out, and they're, I'm not going to say pushing into treatment, but they're suggesting treatment for them. And that helps to improve their travels through the court systems, if you will. So I mentioned earlier that I do primary care, we give Vivitrol injections, and we have a very nice working relationship with the Sheriff's Department that they identify people who qualify for this diversion program. And there's a series of steps that occur then throughout what I'm familiar with Aspire. Other organizations have a hand in this as well. But Aspire gets the patient into our system. They have coaches, they go to classes, and they'll come to the health center. This might surprise you, but people who have addictions, they don't take care of their health. They haven't even thought about their health for years. And so this is one of the things that we do with them. We bring them into a primary health care office. We care about you. We care about your health. We identify several health conditions with folks who have ignored their health. And we educate them about the Vivitrol injection. Most times people are wanting something to prevent them from having cravings. They want the help. Do we ever get anybody that comes in, their arm's a little twisted? Yes. But for the most part, people want the help. I talked to a gentleman last week. He wanted to give Vivitrol. He said, you know, it's really working. This was his third shot. And I said, so what do you think about the injection? Are you hanging in there with therapy, et cetera, et cetera? And he said, you know, I know that I still need these shots because every time when I look down at my hand, I think about heroin. That's where he injected. So we've injected to date about 110 people. Those folks have come in for multiple injections. It's not perfect. We have people that fall out of the program, but we have a pretty good statistical rate going. You know, I'm seeing 50% of the people that are coming in and they're getting at least 5 shots, and I know the courts are seeing a little bit better than that as far as the average of what's been successful. So the big picture, they shouldn't be in jail. They shouldn't be roaming the streets without help. Again, identifying them, but getting them into help, getting them into treatment.
Well, just to touch on what Sheriff Mellinger had to say, first I want to say that we are blessed in this community to have several top-notch law enforcement agencies. That being said, I think at many levels, our elected officials have failed our law enforcement agencies in how they're able to address some of these issues. Over the course of the last 2 decades, we've consistently shown the benefits of having a treatment base specifically within the criminal justice system. The Madison County Drug Court, they were kind enough to provide me with some numbers here. Nationally, the rate of recidivism for people that go through a drug court, and that's the rate that they reoffend, is 23%. In Madison County, they've been able to reduce that to 6% from the years 2010 to 2015. 6%. That's fantastic. But we only have the resources to currently have 109 folks going through that program. We have 270 in the jail right now, with many more on the street awaiting adjudication. We don't have the resources. And while the strides have been impressive, it's nowhere near where we need to be to fully address this situation. What we need is to improve both national and state policy through a comprehensive legislative process that encompasses prevention, treatment, criminal justice reform, and recovery. As government officials, Too often I hear, well, we'll lock them up and throw away the key, and that's the solution. We'll just get them off the street. That's a gross misunderstanding of what addiction is. There's neurobiology at work here that so many of our elected leaders just choose not to know about. And until we're able to make real change in the policies regarding these issues, unfortunately, I think we're going to be continuing to fight an uphill battle.